Greetings, Mr. Rogues here with yet another video for you. And yes, a very unusual video. This time it's gonna be my hands talking and a nice white wall. Being such an obsessive Two-Face fan, I obviously have a ton of Two-Face action figures. I have almost all of them. And so I decided it would be a great idea if I ranked my 10 favorites. So I'm gonna do that now. My 10 favorites of the ones that I own. But like I said, I do own most of them. Now I'm only going to include standard posable action figures. No statues, no Funko Pops, no minifigures, no pest dispensers. I do actually have a Two-Face pest dispenser. Yeah, that actually exists and I have it. Of course I do. Now let's just jump right into it. Number 10 is Mattel's Arkham City Two-Face. The Arkham design for Two-Face is not really one of my favorites, but I do think it looks okay, and I think this figure captured that look perfectly actually. It looks exactly like he does in the game. It's a vast improvement on the figure that DC Collectibles put out a few years later, which I have here for comparison. I mean, the DC Collect figure is more detailed, but it doesn't look like he does in the game, in my opinion. The face and the body build and everything is completely off to me. Whereas this one looks exactly like he does in the game. This figure sadly didn't come with any weapon of any kind, oddly enough. He only has a coin that's molded into his hand. And it also came in a 2-pack with a Arkham City Batman, which I actually don't own anymore. I gave it away to a friend. But the only reason I bought that 2-pack anyway was because of this Two-Face figure, naturally. Number 9 is this figure. This strange looking Two-Face figure. What is this figure? Well, that's kind of hard to explain. It was a Batman toy line released in 2012. And it's not really based on anything. It's not based on a cartoon, although it does look like it was, because this really does look like something that could appear in an animated show. A very kiddie animated show. Yeah, it was just a random Batman toy line. And this is actually not a figure for adult collectors. This is a toy for kids. As you can see, it looks very kiddie, something that a kid would play with. But I have a real soft spot for this one, even though it looks so weird. Look at those giant arms. And the, giant feet too. This was actually the first Two-Face figure I ever got. As a kid, I always wanted a Two-Face figure for my birthdays or for Christmas, but my parents could never find one for some reason in the toy stores. I always got other figures. There just were no Two-Face figures. But in 2012, my dad just took a gamble and went into a toy store. And this was when I was 22 years old. And he figured, you know, I never was able to find a Two-Face toy for my son back when he was a kid. So now I'm just gonna randomly walk into a toy store and see if I can finally find one. And lo and behold, there was this one on the pegs. What a weird coincidence that he just happened to walk into a toy store that very year when they had this figure on the pegs. And so at the age of 22, it must have been destiny or something, I finally got a Two-Face action figure. And so because of that, this one will always be very special to me. And it does have a really cool design. I like the purple scarring. And his unscarred side too looks very nice, and the black and white suit done in this really weird, I don't know, kind of robotic almost design, or I don't know what to call it. Kind of like he's got armor on himself or something. Yeah, it's a really strange Two-Face, but I love it nonetheless. And number 8 is the DC Superheroes Two-Face from Mattel. This figure was released in 2007. It's one of the earliest adult collector figures for Two-Face. It's actually the second one. As you can see, it comes with a nice Tommy gun. This figure was actually very hard to get. I bought it in like 2015 or something. And by that time it was very rare and very expensive. But I finally got it. Finally found it on Amazon, and boy oh boy did it cost me quite a penny. I don't know why it became so rare and expensive. As you can see, it's a very basic Two-Face. It's not really based on any specific design, it's just a generic Two-Face from the comic books. So because of that, it doesn't really rank that high on my list, but there's nothing wrong with the figure. It's a great Two-Face figure, it's just a little boring. A little too standard. Really nice detail on the scarring. The scarring is definitely the best part of the figure. Number 7 is DC Collectibles Animated Series Two-Face. Yeah, of course I had to include an animated series figure here. There aren't really that many based on the animated series. Specifically, there are more Two-Face figures based on the new Batman Adventures for some reason. There's really only 2 animated series figures. There's this one, of course, and the very first one. It came out in 1993. This little piece of garbage. I mean, it has nice retro historical value, but as a figure, it's not really all that impressive now, is it? This one obviously is a lot better, a vast improvement on the original, and looks a lot more like he does on the show. However, I do feel that the face, or faces, is still a bit off. There's just something about it. It doesn't look exactly like he does on the show. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but something is a bit off about his faces. That's why I'm not ranking it higher, because it is not a perfect figure. I think they could have done a better animated series figure, but it still is a good one. And of course he also comes with a nice Tommy gun. Two-Face figures often comes with Tommy guns. Number 6 is Pirate Two-Face. Yes, a figure from the 90s. A Kenner figure, back when Kenner actually existed. Kenner Toys. Anybody remember them? This is part of the Batman Legends line, I think it was called. It was a line of Batman figures based on the comics, and a lot of them were based on Elseworlds stories. Elseworlds were of course a big thing in the 90s. There was a Batman Pirate Elseworlds in the 90s, and this figure is of course based on that, although Two-Face didn't actually appear in that story, yet he got a figure anyway. Yeah, Pirate Two-Face. I mean, what's not to love about that? And on his scarred side, he's got a peg leg and this weird sword hook hand. And of course, it was the 90s, so on the back, he's got this thing here. You can spin, turn, and he starts spinning his arm. His hook hand starts spinning, you know. Maybe you should have it like this. And it's like he's fighting Batman or some dumb crap. They always did this in the 90s with toys. All toys had some kind of action feature back then. Really dumb. I remember I never really used the action features anyway. I didn't like any of them. This is also from a 2-pack with a Pirate Batman, which I do have, but it's not available right now to me. I just love this design here. I love both sides. Obviously, this scarred pirate side is awesome, but even this side is so interesting, because if you only look at this side of the figure, you would never guess that this guy is supposed to be a villain. He looks like some kind of Prince Charming from a Disney movie or something. He looks like a heroic character, and that's the whole point of Two-Face. He's supposed to be half a hero, and this figure really conveys that idea. Besides the awesome design of the character, really love the coloring of the scarring, by the way, cayenne. That's something we very rarely see on Two-Face. I also have sentimental value for this figure. Now, I just said that this was my first Two-Face figure ever. That isn't quite true. I know that's very confusing. I'm gonna explain it. This figure came out in the 90s, in 95 to be exact, and I actually did have this figure back then. However, I didn't buy it myself, nobody bought it for me, I got it from a friend. We traded figures, I gave him a figure and he gave me a figure, and it was this one. So I didn't get it in package, and it was in very bad condition. A lot of the paint was scraped off, and even this sword on his arm was broken off, so it was only the hook left. The sword was broken off. And all of the joints were very loose. He could barely stand up on his own. So he was a very battered figure. Obviously had been played with a lot. So I was never really quite pleased with that figure because it was in such bad shape and I didn't get it in package. And so I never really counted that as getting a proper Two-Face figure. It was just like a consolation prize, sorta. So this was the first time I got a proper Two-Face figure, in my opinion, in package and in good shape, and actually, you know, bought it. But because I have memories of this figure from the 90s, it obviously has a special place in my heart. And number 5 is this one, the Secret Origins Special Two-Face, based on that cover. I'm gonna show it right here. Yes, based on Brian Boland's design from that comic cover. It was made by DC Collectibles, of course back when they were called DC Direct. It's another one of the earlier adult collector action figures of Two-Face. I think it's the third one ever made. Came out in 2008. This is actually the closest we have to a classic styled Two-Face collector's action figure with the green scarring and the orange suit. But of course, as you can see on the scarred side, his suit is blue, light blue, not purple as it's supposed to be. And his hair is a bit too wild anyway for the classic design. The classic looking Two-Face never really had this wild hair on the scarred side, but it is specifically based on the Brian Boland design from that cover, not on the classic style Two-Face. I know there exists a repaint of this figure in the classic colors, but I don't count that because it's just a repaint, and this design here, the scarring and everything, is not modeled after the classic look anyway, so those colors don't really fit that well in my opinion. We are actually gonna get a classic style Two-Face from Mezco, but until that one is released, this one will have to do. As you can see, he has this cool accessory here that gives this effect that he's flipping the coin, that it's in mid-air, to emulate how he looks on that cover. There's just something about this figure that makes me like it a bit less and makes me not want to rank it higher, and I think he just looks kind of stiff somehow. Kind of awkward. I don't know. That's no matter how you really pose him, he just looks kind of stiff and awkward. So that knocks him down a couple of pegs on this list, but it is a pretty good figure nonetheless. And number 4 is... he dropped his gun. Sits very loose in his hand. Number 4 is the AllStar Batman Two-Face, based on the comic drawn by John Romita Jr. The design that was used as the default look for Two-Face during the early days of the Rebirth continuity. They don't seem to use it anymore. This figure was made by Mattel. Their last Two-Face figure, actually, I'm pretty sure, before they lost the DC license. And the new company that took over the license, McFarlane Toys, has yet to produce a single Two-Face figure. They're just making endless Junker figures, as all of you collectors must be aware of. Now, I really like this design by John Romita Jr. from the comic. It's one of my favorite Two-Face designs. And this figure, I think, captures it really, really well. I think it's a pretty gorgeous looking figure, actually. I love the red jacket and the red tie and the black shirt and pants. Of course, the scarring, the charred scarring, kind of looks volcanic, like lava. It's such a unique Two-Face design. I love the unscarred side of his face too. Yeah, it's based on a great design, and it did a wonderful job in adapting that design for this figure. Number 3 is the Long Halloween Two-Face, based on Tim Sale's design. Another comic Two-Face, based on a specific look from the comics. Tim Sale's version. This figure was made by DC Collectibles, called DC Direct. Back when they made this, it's actually the very first adult collector's Two-Face figure ever made. It came out in 2005 or 6 or something like that, so it's quite old now. The Tim Sale design for Two-Face is another one of my favorites, in the top 3 actually. I love that design, and so naturally I'm gonna love this figure. I think it captures it extremely well. I love the suit, the double-breasted suit. Pinstriped looks so great. I absolutely love the scarred side of his face on this figure. Looks absolutely gruesome and gnarly. I mean, just look at that gorgeous sculpting and color work. Absolutely amazing. I love the hair. Looks exactly like Tim Sale draws Harvey's hair. I'm not really the biggest fan, though, of his unscarred side, because as you can see, he looks a bit too ugly. He doesn't look exactly like he does in the comic. Harvey Dent is supposed to be a handsome fella, and he is drawn that way by Tim Sale, but this figure depicts him as a bit too ugly looking. I mean, it does look fairly accurate, how he looks like in the story, but a bit uglier. So that knocks him down a little bit on the list. If it weren't for that, I might have put him at number 2. Or actually, maybe even on number 1. I'm not quite sure. But besides that, the unscarred side of his face, this figure is pretty much perfect. And while it doesn't have a whole lot of posability like a lot of figures back then had, I don't think it looks awkward and stiff like this one does. I think this one looks really good nonetheless, even though it isn't all that posable. I mean, he doesn't even have knee joints. Can't even bend the knees. As you can see, he comes with his the trademark 22 caliber pistol from that story. This was actually the first adult collector's Two-Face figure I bought. The first adult collector's figure I bought, period. I ordered it online back in 2013, I think. And that's what really kicked off my Two-Face figure collecting. And number 2, my second favorite Two-Face action figure is this one. Based on the Greg Capullo design, which is seen in basically nothing. Greg Capullo barely drew Two-Face. Yet DC Collectibles still decided to make a figure of it. I don't really know why. I really don't know why they did that. But I sure am glad they did, because I absolutely love this figure. Now, yes, I will admit the black and white suit, the plain black and white suit is pretty generic, kind of dull, but the face, I mean, the face is really what does, well, really the scarred side of his face, that is what really sells this figure. I mean, just look at this gnarly stuff. I mean, damn, that is one of the most impressive looking Two-Faces ever. The scarring, yeah, just take that all in. I love the fact that you can't even see his eye, and there's these like tendons, what do you call it, over the eye hole, the eye socket, and oh man, it just looks so gnarly. The teeth and everything, it just looks like all the muscles and stuff are exposed, and yeah, it looks wet even. It's not, but it looks like it. It looks very, very gnarly and very, very impressive. And the unscarred side is very nice too. A very nice Harvey Dent. One that actually looks handsome, unlike the Long Halloween one. So yeah, the head sculpt and paintwork on the head. Basically, the head is what really makes this figure and makes me put him at my number 2. But obviously that is one of the more important parts when it comes to a Two-Face figure. The suit is fine. And the body is fine, the sculpting and the paintwork and all that, it's fine, but it's nothing special. It does the job. And now for my very favorite Two-Face figure, number 1 is the Mezco Two-Face, of course. Of course, I gotta put this one at number 1, even though the fabric suit does look a little bit awkward. It looks a little bit too puffy and big on him, but it's a lot better than a lot of other cloth suits I've seen on figures on this scale. They've definitely improved that. I was very excited about this figure for a very long time when it was announced. It took a long time to finally get out. Yeah, I was very hyped up to get this figure. I even made a couple of posts about it in the community tab, I think. And when I finally got it, it did not disappoint. It did not, except for the cloth jacket on his suit. A little bit. But you know, nothing, no figure is perfect. I never found a figure I find to be 100% perfect. Yeah, I love the color scheme. It's got here black and red. It looks so good together, those two colors. And considering it is a Mezco 112 figure, the details are a lot more impressive than on other figures of this scale. Now, this figure isn't actually based on anything, it's just a original design by Mezco, and I think that's what makes it so great, because they took the time to design their own Two-Face, and they did a fantastic job at it. This is a very unique looking Two-Face. We've never really seen a Two-Face like this before. Now, some people don't like the scarred side of his face because of the coloring. They think it's too similar to the unscarred side. It should have been redder, a lot of people have said. Now, I actually like that the color is like this, so similar to his regular skin tone, because this is more realistic. This is what the acid or fire burn victims actually look like in real life when it's been several years and their scars have begun to heal. And this is obviously supposed to be a Two-Face who's been at it for a few years. It's not a freshly burned Harvey Dent. This is a veteran supervillain Two-Face. I mean, if you're gonna do realistic looking Two-Face scars, this is really the way to do it. And that is obviously a lot what sells this figure for me, the scarring. But also the unscarred side. I really like this. He looks a lot like John Hamm. A lot of people have pointed that out as well, and he does. And it's even more noticeable on the interchangeable head that's unscarred. He has three heads actually. I didn't bring them with me for this video though. Sorry about that. Maybe I should have. Yeah, this figure, it's such a unique, impressive looking figure. I'm in awe of this one. They did such an amazing job at creating a new, unique look for the character. I think this look would work perfectly in a live-action movie. It's very realistic with the scarring, but at the same time also comic booky with his two-toned suit. I think it's gonna be very hard to ever beat this design for Two-Face. If they don't use something looking like this when he finally appears in a live-action movie again, I don't know, like, what are they thinking? They really should go this route, especially when the scarring is concerned. We don't need another charred zombie like the Nolan Two-Face. And I really doubt they're ever gonna go the really comic booky route with a green or purple looking Two-Face anyway, so go with this, go with this. This looks better than the charred zombie anyway, and it's more realistic. You can't survive with burns like that. And anyway, so there you have it, my 10 favorite Two-Face figures from my collection. And my battery is about to die in my camera, so I'm gonna have to end it here very quickly. Remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.